What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of the LivBtr Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Ciano, founder of Sabre Advisors. On today's episode, we have my dear friend, Rachel Scheer, one of the most highly sought-after functional nutritionists in the world. Rachel's approach to all things health have changed my life, and I cannot wait for you guys to listen to this episode. And when you're done, do yourself a favor and download her free ebook, Taking the Root Cause Approach to Health. Guys, enjoy this episode with my friend, Rachel Scheer.
I just want to have peace. Pay for the bill, let them take my card, never see the receipt. Good health, we prize, but everybody around prosperity.
What's up, guys, and welcome to the LivBtr Podcast. This is your host, Jay Ciano, and this is the show for people trying to optimize every area of their life. Let's go.
I just want to have peace.
Rachel Scheer, welcome to the LivBtr Podcast.
Thank you for having me here. I'm excited to be in New York Times Square.
You are, and you've had an amazing trip so far, and thank you for extending your trip to join us.
Just for you.
I don't believe that,
in
but
Barcelona.
I appreciate it. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So, for my audience who do not know you, tell us a little bit about yourself. You could start with root cause.
Root cause, yeah. I'm a certified functional medicine practitioner. I received my degree in nutrition science and dietetics from Baylor University. My background comes from the fitness world. I was a gymnast, I was a dancer. I got into bodybuilding when I was studying dietetics in college. My first love was in aesthetics. I helped people achieve insane aesthetic outcomes, and it was my passion. You know, I love to see what I was capable of doing and pushing my body to these extreme levels. I was the cover of multiple magazines, Men's Health, bodybuilding.com.
Wow.
I don't know if you knew that, but
I did not.
Yeah, my whole launch of my career was really on the fitness and the aesthetic side, but it was my health issues that pushed me more into the functional medicine space and everything that I do now today with helping people take a root cause approach to healing, optimizing health, using comprehensive lab testing. So we look at things like the gut microbiome. Actually, my practice specializes in gut health because a lot of my issues stemmed from having a lot of gut imbalances with my microbiome, but we do things like hormone testing, thyroid, adrenals, micronutrient, toxin testing, and we help people figure out the root of their chronic health issues. So IBS, autoimmune conditions, stubborn weight loss, depression, anxiety, and then we create them a customized treatment plan to not only help them heal, but also get into the best health of their life.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So did your issues start as a result of your journey as a bodybuilder, or
Yes.
were they did? Let's talk about that, because
yeah,
it's extreme, right? I mean, what you put your body through as a bodybuilder.
bodybuilding is not healthy.
Yeah.
At least, right, on the outside looking in, it looks like people who are competing in bodybuilding are incredibly healthy, right? Back then, I looked like the epitome of health, especially on the cover of all these magazines. I was shredded beyond belief, you know, six-pack abs, which I still definitely have a six-pack. But it was, my whole focus was on my physical body. And to be honest, my entire sense of worth, too. At that time of my life came from my physical body. And it was actually 3 years into competing that I started to develop a lot of my health issues. I started to have hormonal imbalances. My thyroid completely plummeted. Severe gut issues where at the end of every single day I would look almost 6 months pregnant because of how bloated I was. And
Like a Ninja Turtle.
like, yeah, you heard me say that in my talk.
I pay attention.
Yeah.
By the way, you might have come to New York for Strong New York, but let's just say it's for my
You pay
podcast.
attention. I
It's
like
my
it.
podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd say I looked like a Ninja Turtle because
Yes.
I had six-pack abs and I was so bloated at the end of every single day. It's humorous now, but it wasn't.
I'm sure.
It wasn't,
Yeah.
at the time. And to be honest, I mean, my whole life now at this moment where I felt like I had put everything into fitness and aesthetics. I mean, I grew up as, like I said, a gymnast and dancer. You know, it felt like I was just in survival mode every single day. I could barely get out of bed. I had severe depression, severe anxiety. I remember one day just literally lying in bed, you know, bawling my eyes out like, this isn't real life. This isn't real life, because it was so hard for me to just literally be alive because of how miserable I felt, and this is what catapulted me into, Western medicine, right? Because something's off in your body, you go the Western medicine route. And that's where, I spent an entire year and a half going to all these specialists. I did, the gastroenterologist who did the colonoscopy, endoscopy, CT scan, MRI. I went to the endocrinologist to look at my hormones. They put me on synthetic thyroid medication. I was on birth control. I went to see the psychologist, and then I'm put on an antidepressant, right? And there's this point now where I'm on 5+ medications to manage all of these symptoms. I'm given the diagnosis of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and even went to the Mayo Clinic. They ran all of their extensive testing, right? Like the best medical facility in the United States.
Did you still look like a picture of health? Like through that, I guess. I
think so. Walking into the doctor's office, they would look at me and be like, "There's nothing wrong with this girl, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's healthy." But I think if somebody actually were to pay attention and to get to know me, and to actually ask questions about my lifestyle, my nutrition, the amount of stress that I was under, right? It actually was pretty obvious, in my opinion, what was really going on. I mean, I was under, at that time, so much metabolic stress. I was pushing my body to a very extreme point. And for me, I always justified it as, I'm somebody who's driven, and excellence is one of my core values, although I do now say there's a difference between excellence and perfectionism. Mm-hmm. And I'll say that at that time of my life, the focus was more on perfectionism, which stems from the core root of unworthiness, versus excellence. There's a core belief of I'm worth the fight, but it's not stemming from that place of unworthiness. But ultimately, I was sent to a colorectal surgeon after even the Mayo Clinic couldn't get to the root of my health issues, put on even antibiotics at this point, and the motility in my gut came to a complete halt. Couldn't even use the restroom without prescription laxatives now. And this is when they actually wanted to cut out my entire large intestine, and that was the solution to a lot of my health issues. So sometimes I shared this part of my story of like, they wanted to cut out my large intestine, and people are like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe, especially for, I was in my early 20s, pretty healthy. I know not healthy given the lifestyle, but nothing structurally actually wrong. Yeah. And, this is really the problem that I see with Western medicine and a lot of these chronic health issues. So gut issues, autoimmune conditions, depression, anxiety, as, people are just left with managing their symptoms and up on multiple medications that, are these medications that may fix a symptom, but then create more symptoms in the long run.
The ripple effect.
Yeah. And that moment in the doctor's office was one of my low moments, a very pivotal point in my life. But, when I share that, people are like, weren't you like the doctors? You're crazy. And it actually wasn't the case. I remember sitting in that office and was like, cool, when can we schedule the surgery?
Right.
I was like, can we get it in like next week? Like I was that low and I was that desperate. And one thing that being at that point has really taught me and has made me so empathetic in the work that I do is I know what it's like to be at that point where you just want to give up. I know what it's like to struggle. I know what it's like for those people who want that quick fix, who just want whatever they can lean on, right? Whatever that thing is, whether it's the medication, whether it's alcohol, whether it's that thing that can just help you feel better. I know what that's like. I've been there before, and I can speak to that in other people. So it was this moment where, there was that small part of me that was like, all right, just give it, a couple more months. I made this like agreement with myself, and it was like, maybe try a different route, 3 months. And if you're still not feeling better, because they couldn't obviously get me in next week for the surgery.
Yeah, fortunately. Right?
So yeah, fortunately. And, that catapulted me into a new obsession of just trying to get to the root cause of my health issues and my gut issues. And I became obsessed with learning everything about the gut and the microbiome and the bacteria in our gut. How long ago
was that?
This was 2016.
Yeah.
launched my functional practice in 2017, a year later, as I found functional medicine. And, I found so much healing through this approach because this was the first time, we were looking at how everything was interconnected throughout the entire body. Wait, you mean the gut influences your hormone and your thyroid, and you mean your adrenals is going to impact this, and everything's influencing each other. We're looking at the body as an interconnected system instead of a random collection of independent organs like what Western medicine was looking at.
Totally, yeah.
Wait, we're actually going to take a holistic approach. We're going to look at things outside of just medicine, like nutrition. We're going to look at trauma. And
see, that's where it gets really interesting because, a lot of what you said, I think makes sense for people, maybe not to the extremes. The only other, people I know that have had the same kind of diagnosis are friends of mine that have Crohn's or colitis and are constantly having things cut out, and really have a challenging, life as a result of that disease. But for you to be in a position where you're being diagnosed like that, how did you make that transition from that moment of not having the surgery, right, and healing? And I love the term root cause because you were getting to the root cause of all of these issues essentially, and not just continuing on all these medications. So what was it like? How did you make that initial adjustment after being told you need to have your large intestines removed?
Yeah, looking back, I was fighting so hard for myself. Even in that journey with me going the Western medicine route, that was me fighting for myself and my healing, trying to figure it out. But that was really the only route that I knew. And I think in that window where they were suggesting my large intestine being removed and there was a period of time before I'd have to wait to get the surgery, I wasn't willing to give up on fighting for myself, even though there was that part of me that was like, yeah, all right, let's just get the surgery. Let's just get it over with, right? And it was something I was very much considering doing. I was still like, I'm going to lean into finding healing. And there was that small part of me that just believed that there was another way. And that's where I just started becoming obsessed, which I think I was already obsessed, which led me to all of these specialists, on this side. But I just became obsessed. Like,
were you changing your diet? Like, what were the things that you did that ultimately helped you, like, on the healing journey?
Yeah. So I think a big part of it was discovering what was off in my microbiome because Western medicine wasn't talking about that, right? I was given the diagnosis of IBS. I found out through microbiome testing, through a breath test that actually looks at how much hydrogen or methane is in your breath, which is what's produced from bacteria in your large intestine or small intestine when there's too much of it. I found out that I had a lot of this dysbiosis, imbalance of bacteria in my gut. So I got functional testing done, and that was sort of that first step. And then
do you help people with that now?
Yes.
Because it's interesting because the microbiome is such a popular topic of conversation in the wellness space, obviously, today.
Yes.
But it's like, I was in the hospital 3 months ago with apparently diverticulitis is what I was told it was. And, everybody on the planet wants to help me through that and so on and so forth. But I think that my gut microbiome is probably at fault for why I ended up in the hospital.
Definitely is at fault.
Yeah, and so I truly don't know how to even get that test or where to go from there. So I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are like, okay, what the hell are you talking about? Yeah. And how do you do a breath test to understand the bacteria in your microbiome?
Yeah, so first is a stool test. That's the full microbiome test.
So Gabrielle sent me that kit. I still haven't used it.
You need to do it.
Probably.
Yeah, especially if you had diverticulitis, because you have probably a degree of dysbiosis because bacteria is part of the issue. Why do they put you on an antibiotic, right? When you get diverticulitis? Right. To try to get rid of the bacteria overgrowth. But the issue isn't the root cause isn't the bacteria overgrowth. It's what's creating it in the first place. So when you run a microbiome test, right, we're looking at good bacteria that you could be low in. So probiotics, we're looking at bacteria overgrowths, bad bacteria that can create inflammation. We're looking for pathogens. We can look for parasites, fungal overgrowths. It's not just bacteria that are in our gut. And all bacteria is not bad, and all bacteria is not good. So good probiotics, bad bacteria we also have that we don't want there. And when we have an overgrowth of bad bacteria, or we have pathogens that have grown in the gut, or something called SIBO, small intestinal bacteria overgrowth, where we just have an overabundance of bacteria that have migrated up to the small intestine, this is where we have dysbiosis, an imbalance, which when the microbiome is off, this is going to impact motility in the gut. So this was a big part for me, right? And the motility came to a halt. We also know that
what a nice term for what it actually is.
Yeah.
Motility, yes.
It's a nicer way to say constipation.
Exactly. Never
the
heard that term.
motility in my guts came to a halt.
Yes, exactly. Sounds so
I'll say constipation.
So eloquent. Yes.
I talk about gut health. We
Yeah.
talk about poop all the time.
Yes.
I'm actually that person who can be at dinner and talking about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, functional space. This is just what I'm used to talking about.
But I feel like a lot of people suffer from that.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Like, we run testing on all of our clients who come to my practice, at least microbiome tests, we run the blood tests, all of that. And I'd say about 9 out of 10 people have a degree of dysbiosis, because what impacts your microbiome? It's your nutrition. We look at the SAD diet, the standard American diet, which is full of sugar, processed foods, gluten, wheat, industrial seed oils. All of those things wreak havoc on our microbiome, cause inflammation. Alcohol breaks down the gut lining. It can really negatively impact the guts. And then we
Killing
look at
bacteria,
stress.
I'm assuming, right? Like alcohol.
So alcohol, yeah, I mean, it can impact the bacteria in the gut, but a big part of what it does is it creates inflammation, and then it breaks down the gut lining. So our gut lining's 1 cell layer thick. So it can be broken down easily. Alcohol, inflammatory foods, chronic stress can break down the gut lining, which is going to be where you start to get food bacteria toxins leaking into the bloodstream.
Leaky gut.
Leaky gut.
Yeah, all right. See,
Leaky
I
gut.
know a thing or two.
Now you have food sensitivities. Some people, this is actually the root of why they develop an autoimmune condition, right? Because if you have things that are in your bloodstream that aren't supposed to be there, your immune system, right, is going to become overactivated. And over time, your immune system can begin to attack its own tissue, leading to things like Hashimoto's autoimmunity.
Can you test for this stuff in children as well?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Interesting.
Kids who have ADHD, a lot of mental health issues all stem back to the gut, because the gut and the brain are very interconnected. So for me, when I found out I had a lot of dysbiosis, bacteria overgrowth, I started to treat it because I was learning so much about these bacteria and how they're not just dormant in Western medicine. Again, wasn't talking about that. And the solution wasn't to get on an antibiotic, because in the long run, you wipe out a lot of good bacteria and it doesn't actually fix the root. So I also, as I was doing these protocols, so I had to regenerate my gut lining, which is key targeted supplements like L-glutamine, aloe vera, licorice roots, colostrum, great for healing the gut. Removing foods that my gut could no longer tolerate. So I had to pull out a lot of processed foods from my diet, even though I was fit and I was lean, right? It was macro friendly. It wasn't necessarily gut friendly. So I had to shift my nutrition around. But I also, because my gut became so compromised, I couldn't tolerate a lot of the healthy foods that somebody who maybe didn't have the same issues did. So I had to pull out actually a lot of fiber, because what is fiber? It's a prebiotic. So it feeds bacteria, prebiotic, biotic bacteria. So if I had bacteria overgrowth as part of the issue, I was feeding it by eating a diet high in fiber. So I had to do different herbals, which would actually kill off a lot of the bacteria overgrowth. But the root cause still wasn't the dysbiosis, right? It was what led to it in the first place. Well, what led to that in the first place, right? And this is where I love this work, because we peel it back even more, right? And same for any person, right? Their health issues. It's not the hormone. It's not the low thyroid. It's what led to all of these things in the first place. And for me, it was how much I was pushing my body to these extreme points. It was that trauma piece. So even for me on this healing journey, as I did all of these functional protocols, I would get better, no doubt. My gut improved. I started to be able to go days, weeks without having gut issues. My mental clarity, brain fog went away, because one of the number one symptoms of leaky gut is actually brain fog. It's neurological. I started to see improvement, but I wasn't fully healed. And that was when I really started to have to take a radical look at myself and my life. And I said, earlier on this podcast, I was operating from a lot of my own inner unworthiness, that wounded part of myself, which is what caused me to push my body to extreme points, to override what my body was saying, where it was like, hey, slow down. You're good. No, I was trying to prove something. What, to who? To a judge? No, to myself, really. So I began this new healing journey. And it was then where actually I started to truly heal. And one thing I always say is the whole person must heal for the gut to function optimally. And if you think about what's happening when we're under stress, chronic stress, right? Not acute stress. Acute stress is anti-inflammatory actually to the body. That's like the ice bath or the workouts. Chronic stress, cortisol, chronically elevated. What is happening is the gut will completely shut down, fight or flight. We're not in rest and digest. The gut shuts down. What happens when the gut shuts down? We see the motility come to a halt. We see inflammation increase throughout the body. We see the immune system impacted. What do we see in the neuroendocrine system? Over time, we see hormones decline. We see thyroid decline as a byproduct. So this is the entire cascade of events that take place. So then, not to mention, this can create a terrain since the gut's compromised. We're not producing digestive enzymes where bacteria can overgrow. So this is where dis-ease begins to occur from chronic stress. And then you factor in poor diet, this standard American diet, but also trauma, right? Because how is trauma different than chronic stress? If you think about it, what is the ways in which somebody's operating when they have trauma? Oftentimes from a nervous system level, these people, myself being one of them, we're operating from a hypervigilant nervous system. We're always in this hyper-aroused state. Cortisol is chronically elevated. So it's not different than chronic stress. The brain doesn't know the difference when there's trauma or when there's actual chronic stress. The body's going to respond in the same way. And
how do you know where your cortisol levels are?
You can feel it, hopefully, for one.
Course, yeah.
We can test it as well. We can do a full 24-hour adrenal test on somebody. And, for somebody who maybe is at like stage 1 of, you could say like adrenal, some people argue against that there's such thing as adrenal fatigue and all of that. But, we can see cortisol chronically elevated. Oftentimes we can see DHEA, which is also produced from the adrenal glands, on the high side. And then maybe we'll see some other downstream things that correlate with high adrenal output. Some are hormones declining, a bit is thyroid, maybe a little bit suppressed. What's happening with the gut, the immune system, inflammatory response. What we can also see is sometimes we'll have low cortisol, low adrenal output. So I don't know if you were ever a fan of like David Goggins and his stuff, right? He pushed his body to an extreme point. What happened at the end of the book? Do you remember? Did you read it?
I did read it.
Yeah. He could not get out of bed.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And he went to all these doctors and they couldn't figure it out, right? He had adrenal exhaustion. He had burned through so much of his adrenal output. He actually had to get on cortisol because his body was no longer producing it. So
he's an extreme example.
Yeah, he's a very extreme example. Yeah. But we will actually see this quite a bit. And people who have a ton of chronic stress and high-level entrepreneurs and people who don't listen to their body, and they will push their body to these extreme points. And we can see, actually, it's the opposite. It's not no longer high cortisol. It's actually low. And this is the person who can barely get out of bed. They're exhausted. Sometimes this is like the wired but tired feeling, having to rely on just coffee throughout the day to just give you that little bit of that cortisol spike because it will help you, get that energy, but then immediately you feel depleted again. And then it's not just, the mental impacts too. It's all the other physical things I shared that happen.
So you created businesses out of the need for yourself, essentially, right? So you're taking all the things you just described and offering them as a service to other people.
Yeah. From my healing journey and how I felt very let down from Western medicine. I wanted to give other people the approach that I wish that I had.
Yeah.
So I created a business around that. That's what led me, with my background in dietetics, and even though I was working in clinical and, on the athletic performance side, I shifted and got into functional medicine, and I just built my business around this whole mission. Never thought it would grow the way that it did, but it was very heart-centric. And
I think that's, it's interesting because we talked a little bit about like hustle culture, right? And like, I think how not so long ago that was really popular, and talking about like masculine.
I think it still is popular.
Yeah, I think that it's like, I think like the Gary Vaynerchuk, like it's not as loud. I think that it's obviously out there. But I do think people realize more today than ever that everything's interconnected, right? Like you have to focus on not just like fitness and, overtraining and so on and so forth. It's more like people are aware of recovery and complete health, right? Mm-hmm. Like especially in my business, like the lines are blurred. It's no longer, just fitness, or it's actually the recovery side, the overall wellness. Mm-hmm. And then medical side is more popular. It's more, there's so many more businesses in that space than there are like fitness
There's
businesses.
Such a need for it now.
Of course, it's about time.
Yeah.
But it also, I think people are starting to wake up that just because you're suffering from a symptom and you go to a doctor and they prescribe something to you, you're not getting to the root cause. But what are things that affect your overall health that you pay attention to in your own life? Obviously we spoke about sleep. What are those important pillars that people should pay attention to?
Yeah, I think the two biggest one is going to be emotional health, and then, nutrition, what we're putting into our body. And of course we can dive into the nutrition side. I mentioned, the standard American diet. I can simplify it for everybody, eat real whole food as much as possible. I'm actually a big fan of the paleo diet. Eat a lot of high quality animal protein, grass-fed and finished, wild caught.
It's because you're from Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, lots of steak. My diet is like steak, berries. Yeah. Berries have a lot of polyphenols, actually great for gut health.
Fiber?
Polyphenols.
Don't they have fiber?
They also have fiber too. Yeah. Polyphenols act like a prebiotic, so they feed good bacteria in the gut. And then leafy greens, arugula, spinach, lots of dark chocolate.
Yeah,
I love dark chocolate. Avocado, and like that's my diet.
And what about just routine in general? Like what you talk about emotional, well-being and listening to your body and things of that nature. I think some people are more intuitive. For me, like after doing Everesting and sleeping for 4 hours and hiking for 20-something hours, I was completely shot after that. But the interesting part is that for me it took more of a mental toll for me than like a physical.
For sure.
During it was physical, obviously, but afterwards it was a tremendous amount of dopamine. I was ton of adrenaline. Like
what you get after speaking sometimes. I've had that before, like big trips, and then you
riding
feel that
high, right? And
after.
then like the same way that like the same way that artificial dopamine. I have a lot of experience in that world.
Entrepreneur dopamine roller coaster.
Yeah,
that's
all
a
of
real
that.
thing.
It is
the addiction to it, all the highs and the lows and all of it.
And when you're depleted, it's depressing, and it gets, it's mental. It was more of the after effect again was more of a mental one for me, transitioning back into like life after that intense work.
Yeah.
So how do you pay attention to your emotional health, right? Like it's something hard to quantify or calculate.
So I love the topic of nervous system regulation because you can't heal the body without healing the nervous system. What is the root of what's being manifested through trauma from poor nutrition when you're eating inflammatory foods? Is we're seeing so much nervous system dysregulation, which is, that's when either the nervous system is upregulated and it's in that chronic stress place, or there's blood sugar imbalances where you're getting drops, and then every time your blood sugar drops, your cortisol's picking up, and you're this roller coaster throughout the day, and you feel that emotionally throughout the day. And so I've had to really learn, especially as a high level entrepreneur, because the parts of me that existed when I was competing in bodybuilding didn't necessarily go away. Like, one of my God-given gifts is drive, core values, excellence, right? That's something that I will always pursue, different than perfectionism. But I'm driven, and right, and when it's geared towards the right things in my life, you know, maybe it's not ego driven, but it's driven towards my purpose and God's purpose for me in my life. It's a beautiful thing, but I've actually had to learn to slow down and pull back. And, you know, we were talking about off air, right? Often the things that we need to do and lean into is the opposite of our inherent habitual patterns that we want to do. So for me, you know, I struggled with nervous system imbalances, and I had to work on really regulating my nervous system, meditation and breath work, and getting to the root of my trauma and healing that, which is working on the relationship with myself, which I say relationship is relate to self, view of self, and where that was stemming from. All of those things really helped me regulate my nervous system.
When you took the stage at Strong New York to speak, like walking up on the stage, did you feel like part of you was not necessarily supposed to be there? Like, do you have a imposter syndrome complex at all?
In certain environments, right? I think we all can.
I think it's natural. I think it would be weird not to on some level.
I think anytime we are up leveling in our life, the things that come up aren't things that are new. They're still our core wounds. And an example of this would be, you know, I remember when I just got into podcasting and I had to get my first speaking event. Oh my gosh, the imposter syndrome that came up. Who am I to be up there? Nobody's going to listen to me. You know, all of that type of inner talk, which what is that core wound? I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. That is really making its way on the scene. And then sometimes we listen to it and we cop out. For me, it's always been like, oh yeah, you're going to pop up? Well, guess what? This is exactly why, you know, we have to. But I was able to do healing on myself, where now at that level, especially much higher levels, right? And speaking at places like Strong New York, and I do speaking all the time and podcasting, that inner dialogue doesn't come up for me anymore. I deserve to be up there. I'm more than worthy. I'm more than knowledgeable to be up there. Yeah. I have something to say.
Well,
and
it's also because you studied your first talk to 20 people and you delivered it on cue.
Yeah, I proved it to myself, but also I healed a lot of, so it's two parts, right? Because we have to prove it to ourselves with small wins to create that sense of belief. And then also there's that healing part. But I bet you if you were like, hey, Rachel, you want to come speak to 5,000 people? Yeah. That piece might come up for me. Yeah. You know, the imposter syndrome again, which isn't different, but it's a new level now that I'm playing at. And that's where actually I love to reframe it as every time you're actually up leveling in your life, don't be surprised when those imposter syndrome, those core wounds start to come up because you just haven't healed to that level yet, but it's nothing new.
But you also, I mean, I think that those feelings make you feel alive, right? Yeah. And I think, you know, for me, doing specific things to build resilience and confidence, like I think the only way that you can build confidence is by doing things that scare you and then completing that task and being proud of yourself and building upon that. And I think if you're not pushing yourself, you know, in some way, you're never going to get comfortable and you're never going to level up. And that's the big difference between high-performing people and the rest of the world. But it's funny because when we were talking about high performance and, you know, again, like that hustle culture, I don't think I made the point earlier where it's like you're actually holding yourself back on some level if you're just like intentionally trying to do hard things. You're not necessarily, you know, accomplishing, you could just be spinning your wheels, but not actually like getting anywhere, so to speak, you know, just by doing that constant grind. I find myself, even as I continue on in my career and in life, realizing that, you know what, I could probably get a lot more done in a shorter period of time, but I always wanted to act busy. Like it made me feel good. It made me feel proud. And I was doing it for other people. Like it was like, no, I work really hard. Like, can't you tell? Like what could have taken me 2 hours took me 5, you know? It's almost like backwards.
So my question then would be in that is, was that really the hard thing then? Right? If that was what you felt so good and comfortable in, right? That fed the, hey, I feel important. I feel better when I'm working, which may have been, yes, physically hard, even mentally hard. Yeah. But was that really the hard thing for you?
Well, I think that, the hard thing for me today is I agree to do something that's outside of my comfort zone, and I get excited about it, and I kind of train for it and show up, and I'm excited to take on that challenge. I'm talking more about like operating out of ego, when out of insecurity, right? Of having to prove to my father, having to prove to myself, having to prove to people around me, before I've really like arrived and like actually accomplished much. I think that I felt like I had to like be this proud person that was working really hard. I couldn't be home. I had to travel to this thing that I didn't necessarily have to be at, that I just really inefficient and busy as opposed to like productive and spending the time where it should be, including my whole life, right? Like not just business, not career, but every area in life.
Yeah. Early on in my own healing journey, there was this point where I realized that I could do anything that I wanted, right? I realized that I was capable, and I developed this belief in myself of like, wow, if I want to speak, if I want to build a business, I can do it. So I did. Yeah. I did everything that I could dream up or scheme up. But then there was this second part in my healing journey where I realized that I could, but just because I could, I didn't have to. And I didn't need to, because now I had nothing to prove, not to anybody else, but also not to myself. Right. Even more. So I think there's that phase, which is a part of the healing journey. It is, wow, I want to prove to myself that I can. Correct. I want to go after these things. I want to maybe stick it to the people who talked down on me, who said I was stupid, who told me that I could never do it or amount to anything. And that's part of that journey. I think, though, that second level, that second is, I can, and I'm good.
I think the life gets really beautiful when you hit that second level and you attract like-minded people. And that's where the magic happens, right? And I think that's an interesting concept because we met through mutual friends. We bump into each other at events with mutual like-minded people. I don't think everybody's necessarily, in the same space in their life, so to speak, but I do think that people that are intentional and no longer really have anything to prove to themselves, forget the other people, right? Forget the spectators, right? Because I don't think people that are actually on the field care so much about the people in the stands. So it's an interesting concept because I think when you really focus on yourself and actually trying to heal the trauma and doing the hard work to remove alcohol in my case and sit with myself and deal with the loss of my parents and, actually rather than run from it or numb myself, it's pretty amazing because like the people that I actually one day wished I could, be in association with now actually are attracted to me.
You probably view them differently.
Oh, completely.
A lot too.
Yeah, of course.
There's so many people I looked up to,
right?
And there's a lot I still do, but like in the space, and now I just see things so differently. and I'm not also coming from the place of like, I'm perfect, I'm healed, I have my moments of all my things that come up.
Are you ever healed? Like on
No.
some level, like you have to always work through.
It's like the up-leveling thing, right? Yeah. I think we heal to a level, but then if you are somebody who's growing, it's the same wounds,
right.
but you're now at a new level and they're coming up again, and then you get to do more healing. So we're always healing. It's a journey that we never get to the point that we're like, I'm done. And if you're done, then you're not growing, and then we're dying at that point.
Yeah. I'm curious, as people listen to this, if they actually are looking at this the same way as we are, or they're like, they're crazy. Right? Because it might not make sense to everybody, right? Because I don't think everybody's focused truly on necessarily being better today than they were yesterday. And that sounds really like hokey and cheesy, but when you're really mindful and intentional about that, it's beautiful. You're no longer constipated in life.
Thank you. I had to throw that in there.
Full circle moment.
That was good.
Right?
That was
no,
good.
because honestly, like it's a great analogy, because you can get stuck.
Yes, definitely. And there's a lot of personal development and self-help out there, but I think it's very surface level and to a lot of degrees. And I think
a lot of it's snake oil too, where it's just like people that are internet gurus that are spewing information at you
that they heard or read in another book and all of that. But there's like one that is that actually used to land for me a lot, to be honest, and it no longer lands for me. And it was the quote of become the version of yourself that you need to become, right? Or like become your future self.
Correct.
Something along those lines, right? And I just remember sitting with that one day and I go, no, I'm not trying to just see who I need to become, envisioning that person becoming him. I'm actually doing the opposite. I am peeling back mask by mask, layer by layer that I have built up over time of who that I think I need to be.
Identity.
And I am becoming more of my authentic self. I'm not coming from this place of who do I need to become. I'm coming from the place of who I am is the version that is going to actually change the world. I truly think that it is our authentic self that is going to make the most impact in this world, right? And we spend our entire life, with these wounds, these masks that we put on over time, trying to be somebody so we can feel loved, so we can feel worthy, right? That's what the core hustle culture is, and it's like when we realize that it's all just this like facade. And I also think too, you want to know what your purpose is. It's tied to your authenticity. You cannot be in your purpose if you're not truly authentically yourself, because how could it be your purpose? So if you want to know what your purpose is, we have to begin to operate from our authentic self. And I know people even listening to that, it's like, okay, what is my authentic self, right? Because that's now another journey to get back, into, because it's been a lifetime of putting on all of these masks over time and again. And that's really the healing game.
Yeah.
Healing is peeling back mask after mask.
It's powerful. It's amazing how a conversation on gut health can...
This is how I operate.
Likewise.
It's not just about gut health. I start with gut health and then I'm like, we're going to go to the soul.
But I think that is really the only way to, to really heal, right? Like, and you just said, and I've heard several times now, how much your brain is attached to your gut, and obviously all these things affect one another. And I don't think there's so many people that aren't even thinking about a gut microbiome. Forget, the impact it could have on your energy level, your, brain fog, like those things, right? Like just being aware. And I think so many people will learn so much from this conversation, which is awesome.
It's been fun.
It has. where can everybody find you, and where can they learn about how they could potentially work with you if they want these tests and getting their lab work done, and not just the blueprint, but the execution of the blueprint?
Yeah. Instagram is Rachel Scheer. My website is rachelscheer.com. And that's where you can learn all about our functional medicine process, coaching, and testing.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I just wanna have peace. Pay for the bill, let them take my card, never see the receipt. Good health, we proud, but everybody around prosperity. I just wanna have peace.